Hello and welcome to the Mac Admins podcast. I'm your host today, Tom Bridge, and I'm joined by some of my incredible friends who are up here on stage with me. James, I get to see you in person. This is awesome.
Yes, I traveled a long way to get here, so.
Yeah, half a world. So
Yeah, something like that.
thank you so much for joining us here at JNUC. And Pepine, how are you?
Doing good. I traveled not very far at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say hop, skip, and a jump for you. But nobody beats Charles in terms of proximity. Charles, it's so good to see you in person.
It's good to see you too, Tom. How you been?
I've been pretty good. This is a great conference. We've had a wonderful first day here at JNUC, and it's a real treat to be here for the first time. I've never been to a JNUC before, and it's a really great atmosphere. I saw that it's the largest rally of Mac admins, and I think that's an awesome way to put it. And it's been a really positive first day. I've learned a lot about what's coming down the pike for Jamf and for Jamf admins out there in the world. And it's been really, really awesome. So I also want to take a moment and introduce our wonderful guests. So Mr. Williams, Eric Williams from IBM, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a real pleasure to hear about IBM's adoption process of the Mac environment. And we hope you can share more about that today as we go through the podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That'd be awesome. And go ahead.
So before we get started, one of the things that we always like to do is an origin story. Who loves the origin story? So for those of you coming in through live streaming or watching this later, everyone clapped. Every single person clapped. So I'd like to thank you and give you chocolate. Never mind. So Eric, take us through your origin story. How did you start? When you were a small child? No.
Slightly after that.
So I joined IBM about 3 years ago. I actually joined from Apple. I was an SE at Apple, and I heard about the IBM project. Obviously, it was really exciting to hear that something on this scale was, kind of underway, and so I joined. It was originally Danielle, my manager, and I. It was just us two, and then here we are today, 120,000 devices later. Yep.
That's quite a count.
Yeah.
That's a couple.
So I know that, and that kind of takes us into some of our numbers section where we want to talk a little bit about, how you guys have done that. And, you guys have put out some pretty fantastic numbers every year in terms of, details. And I think here of so many different white papers that we've seen from the IBM team over the last couple of years. And no doubt there's going to be some awesome stuff coming down the pike from you guys. What should we look out for?
Yeah, so we're really continuing to kind of refine the experience. We started off, again, the program's only about 2 years old, and originally we were just trying to automate as much as we could, get as much as we could out there, and now we're kind of taking a look at it and polishing everything, right? So we really want to focus on the user experience. We have someone dedicated kind of to the user experience now, and he's going through the program with a fine-tooth comb, kind of looking at all the things that we missed originally, some of the things that we can streamline, and some of the things that we kind of hobbled together because we didn't have time. We're kind of revisiting those. So anyways, I think you'll see some really cool stuff from us. We're working on Enrollment 3.0, which is kind of the new version of what you saw last year. That'll come out later this year. Hopefully it's something that we'll be able to share with community. You'll see what that experience looks like.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. And you said slowly bringing folks onto the team. If you can share, what is about your team size right now?
Sure. So there are 7 engineers on the team, and then myself,
Okay.
and then we have a project manager too.
Wow. So 120,000 Macs backed by, I don't even know what that ratio is. That's an insane ratio of engineer to end user.
Yeah, I think it's quite incredible. Our team, is amazing. I think it's incredible we're able to manage that many devices. Yeah.
Is that in part due to sort of obviously there's back-end systems you can rely on that you don't have to manage. It's sort of like come as a sort of a given to working, implementing this at IBM. Is that part of it, or is it all original, tools that you had to write?
Yeah, for the most part, I think we do things in a really custom way. So we're really heavy on streamlining the user experience, and we're actually counter kind of to the way that I would do it at another company, because we take a look at the IBM culture, we take a look at our end users, and we design it, something that's appropriate for them. So I think actually most things we do in an incredibly difficult way. The reason we're able to run with such a small team is the talent of the team. We hired very highly skilled engineers. We decided it would be best to have fewer engineers with, a really great talent pool versus hiring a lot of people that maybe weren't so good.
Very cool.
So you mentioned highly talented engineers. Do you know much about the background of your team members, like where they came from?
Sure.
Other than the ones that came from Jamf.
Yes, so we have two primary sources of talent, Apple and Jamf. And so we're fortunate enough we were able to recruit from Apple and Jamf. We have over 100 years of talent, Mac management experience on the team. The two other members of the team that didn't come from Apple or Jamf, actually we met at JNUC. And so here at JNUC, we met someone last year, and then the year before we met someone else. So yeah, the Mac community here.
So who have you met this year that you're going to hire?
It's a $1 million question, right?
Is that how much they make?
Stop the press.
Can I?
Good job.
So we know that IBM's been deploying Macs for a number of years now. Can you take us through a bit of that timeline? Like, how many Macs do you have now? Is the onboarding slowing down? Is it still ramping up?
Yeah, so we started deploying Macs June 2015. So that's really when Mac at IBM started. I started January of 2015. We had about 6 months of pilot, figuring things out, getting things ready. Again, today we're at 120,000 devices. We do continue to grow extremely rapidly. We hope, sorry, IBM has 450,000 full-time employees roughly, and we hope to end up around half of those employees on the Mac. So we continue to watch that.
And as you take us through that process, you said you had about a 6-month period to kind of ramp up and internally test. And can you take us through some of that period of time? What were some of there had to be a moment where you're just like, oh yeah, this is totally going to work.
Well, there was the moment of when it was totally going to work, and there was the moment of when it did not work at all.
Like all good projects.
Yeah, exactly. So when I say 6 months, that's actually being quite generous, because we entered into a 12,000 computer kind of pilot about 3 months in. So 90 days from nothing to everything. Yeah, we were really, really aggressive with our timeline. And so actually the week before, we were set to make this huge announcement. The CEO is going to make an announcement internally, hey, Mac's a choice. Everything worked perfectly. We were really happy with it. It was a Friday. Everything worked exactly the way that we wanted. And then Sunday, we went to test it. Nothing worked at all. It completely fell apart. And so Jamf was kind enough to get on the phone with pretty much the entire Jamf team. And we spent about 24 hours putting it together. And I think about 2 hours before the announcement, everything worked again. And then, as we hired folks, we spent about 3 months cleaning that up and getting it to a point where it was pretty stable.
Just-in-time delivery.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I remember that. There were like 5, 6 people on airplanes heading out to see you guys.
It was a
memory
pretty
serves.
serious, yes, I did not sleep at all.
So, because some of us continue to run into issues here and there, you want to take us through a couple of the challenges that you faced?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things is I think we wanted to do a different user experience. And so hopefully most of you guys have seen the enrollment video, the way that we did it. And I think, being at Apple before, there's a lot of talk of, especially if you're using DEP, you would enroll via DEP, and then it would work kind of similar to mobile. Apps would just kind of appear on the desktop. There's not a lot of user interaction or intervention. And when we were doing that in the pilot, it just didn't feel right for our users. They were confused. They didn't really understand what was happening. They kind of wanted more. And so we were doing things a bit differently. We wanted to lock the user out of the computer, for example, when we were enrolling. Some of our software is pretty complicated in the way that it installs. And so, we're building this whole framework of going back to kind of the Jamf helper window where you've got, this big screen on the device that's telling you we're enrolling, we're installing applications. And that was kind of different from what other companies were doing at the time. It was different from what Apple was suggesting at the time. It was different from what I would have suggested, a few months prior. But it was what was right for our users. And so it was kind of complicated just figuring that out, going back to that type of workflow.
Yeah, that sounds. It sounds like a lot of engineering went into that just to get that just right, because obviously the user experience. And I think I've caught a few talks now, and there's a lot of seems to be a lot of more emphasis these days on culture and end user experiences, which is a good thing because ultimately these are the machines you give to your users. How in whatever fancy way you manage them is kind of like, no one cares, essentially. Like, our jobs are doing things that no one cares about when they go right and cares a lot about when they go wrong. So getting that user experience right is obviously important. Can you give any kind of like details on like kind of like what technical, like, you know, what stacks you're using, to use a fancy word, but like kind of like what you know, maybe what was already there, what did you have to you know, fully instate new from scratch, and also from, you know, from a deployment standpoint, from a security standpoint, like how do you you know, what kind of backends can you leverage when you do a completely new project like this?
Yeah, so certainly there were legacy IBM backends that we had to integrate with, right? But for the most part, everything that we used was brand new. So one of the things that was kind of key to Mac at IBM and key to us, this was a project about culture change. And so part of that was we wanted to use the best tools. We didn't want to just integrate with what was already out there. So for the most part, I actually can't think of anything outside of things that we're not directly involved with that we leveraged that wasn't brand new. We are internally hosted on IBM Blue Cloud, so Jamf is hosted on IBM Blue Cloud. Our content distribution is via Akamai, so we work with Jamf to kind of work that out. We use Nagios and Zabbix for reporting. MySQL Enterprise, GitHub, Jira, ServiceNow, and TestRail. So lots of software. All of this stuff was brand new to IBM. So you know, my team, as they came on board, they said, you know, listen, we've used this tool, or we believe in this tool, and we think it'll make a difference. And all of this was entirely new for IBM.
Was there any opportunity to, you know, to use any other tools, you know, like an open source tool? Like, you know, there's plenty of tools out there for reporting and for things like that. Like, is there an opportunity to do that, or, you know, is there sort of like a, because I know like in large orgs, obviously there are limits to what you can actually do. So, or was that hard, like what you said, like new solutions that you had to implement? Like, was that tough, or was it just new stuff and you just had to go through the usual hoops?
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, as long as we involve security, we made sure we're having those conversations. We're involving legal to make sure that they're okay with it. They were very receptive to us using new tools. Again, all of these were brand new, and I can't think of any that we got a lot of pushback on. It was also good. Our executive team was very, very supportive, so they often would help push those things through and say, yes, it's important to us that they use this to help us get that pushed through.
Yeah, it's important to have that backing from higher up, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess at this point, it's time to welcome Dr. Emily Kay.
Hi. I made it. It's not that way.
You know, she's really the best of us.
Yep, no, that's 100% true. So, and it's also a wonderful time for us to take a break and thank our sponsor. We have some wonderful sponsors of the podcast here, and especially those who are underwriting later our reception at Britt's Pub, which will happen at 7 o'clock tonight.
It's a reception
and
now?
Joel, it's a reception, it's a party, it's some of both.
Let's just call it an after party.
Who's
Let's
coming
just call
for
it
the
a
free
party.
booze?
All right. So I'm now joined
One
by
person? It's gonna be a lot of booze.
You're gonna be busy.
And now we're joined by Joel Rennick, a proprietor of Orchard and Grove. Sounds like a good title to me. And he's going to tell you about 30 seconds worth about our dear friends at Nomad.
30 seconds exactly.
All right.
We'll go right on the 30.
Right on the
So,
30, at the bottom of the hour.
Right about now.
Now, let Nomad help you lose your bind. Tired of messing with the keychain? Don't want to take help desk tickets about Active Directory password changes? Whether you bind to AD or not, Nomad can help you stay sane by providing your users an easy way to keep track of password expiration, manage their Kerberos tickets, and other admin tasks galore. Visit nomad.menu today to find out more, and that's all.
Thanks very much, Joel. And of course, we appreciate your sponsorship of this podcast and our bar tab later.
And this bottle opener.
So,
And this lovely bottle opener. So be sure to see Joel for a bottle opener.
so getting back to what, by the way, we don't have James editing this, so you have to see it in real life, which is too bad, because it would be hilarious if you could see him scrubbing back and forth and while he's riding the train to work, right?
Yeah, it's hard to keep you guys on track.
Right. So I guess going through the stack of solutions that you guys use, do you use Auto Package?
We do. Yeah, we do. So there are two guys on my team that work with Auto Package. They manage the entire package request process. It's something that we're just kind of integrating into our workflow. We're looking to kind of automate that from end to end to help us with turnaround time. So it's something that we're just now kind of exploring and or trying to integrate better into our environment. Yeah.
So going back to a bit about how you talked about how you rolled out Jamf, and kind of in your own cloud. What were the main lessons that you learned? Do you have a top 3 things that you learned kind of along that process? I can imagine it's quite hard supporting that many users.
Yeah, so one of the biggest lessons that we learned is definitely making sure that you have a good QA environment and that your QA environment, is exactly like production, and that your QA person is kind of separate from the team in a little bit. It shouldn't be someone that's working on other workflows. You want to make sure that they are, completely kind of clear of all of that so that they can take a look at it, kind of through fresh eyes. That was really, really important to our success. The other thing is reporting. So one thing that we did fairly early on was put Nagios in. And that gave us a ton of data. And it wasn't something that I'd really seen in a Mac environment before. But we collect a lot of data, hundreds and hundreds of different parameters. And that really helped us with scaling because we could kind of watch these things as the scale went up to see, okay, these servers are at this point. And it really helped us decide when we needed to add servers and what that hardware needed to look like. And it also helped us with monitoring as well. So one of the cool things about us, typically if something goes wrong, we'll get a text message before something actually goes wrong. So we've been, able to avoid a lot of issues just because of all the different data points that we're collecting. And I think that was, again, very, very important to our success. The other thing is the relationship with our help desk. So I hear a lot of times that engineers don't have a good relationship with their help desk, and I think that's really unfortunate. We located 2 of the engineers on my team in one of the help desks, actually. So they sit in the same office, kind of right next to them, and it's actually the QA lab that's there, which I think is kind of perfect. So as the help desks, they'll see some type of trend, they can just walk over and say, hey, we're getting a lot of tickets on this. And then the QA engineer, JD, he can go in and actually take a look and say, yeah, I see this. And then he can immediately escalate to the team. I think that's really helped us a lot as well. We've been able to kind of very quickly get through some issues before there are actually issues because of that integration.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because I've only been in my career only in one organization where there was actually a QA team that actually, like you said, was separate, had their own environment that was basically a fresh environment every time engineers come up with some kooky system to do a thing and then have them actually tested and let you know that what you came up with that worked on this machine and that machine actually works in QA. Well, not our cookie.
He's asking for a friend.
Yeah.
He hasn't done that.
But I'm saying I can definitely relate in that. Then having that weekly meeting with the QA team and them, throwing at you, we tested this and this worked or this doesn't work, helps to get that fresh perspective, which is I think hard to have when you are just getting through, get this feature out, get that feature out, to get that back before it goes to the users.
Absolutely, we meet 4 days a week.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
It's probably also important to note that if you can't have a full kind of identical setup for prod and for QA, you can always just test in production. That just works really well. Testing on a Friday afternoon.
James, we talked about this. No.
Or read only
No.
Friday. Not allowed.
So Emily, you just joined us. Would you like to fire off with a question?
Yeah, let's go down the list. That was a visual gag for people that are listening to this later. So you mentioned QA, and I know JD on your QA team because I'm based out of Austin too. So what kind of version control do y'all have for how your production JS is set up in the event that something slips past JD somehow, even though he's really good at breaking stuff? What do you do?
Sure, so we leverage Jira for change management. We kind of log everything in Jira, so we kind of know, when we take a look at something that's been changed, we know exactly what was changed and how. We'd like to see greater version control in Jamf Pro kind of natively to help us with some of this stuff, but unfortunately that's not really there today. We also leverage GitHub, so we have kind of the record there and the old code there as well. Yeah.
I would love to hear, I probably can't talk about it, we probably don't have a whole lot of time, but how you integrate changes through GitHub to Jamf is an interesting, it's a topic that I think has come up quite a bit, about how can you push changes and then have it either go through an enterprise GitHub account or have some way to replicate it so that you have that kind of versioning there.
Just out of curiosity, you mean from a trying to track what, a journaling standpoint, or from a approval standpoint? What are you more concerned about?
I think a simple scenario would be a change is made to an extension attribute, and you see when the change was made I mean, you can get a little bit from the history button, right, in Jamf, but actually having a GitHub like versioning history, because depending on your log flushing, you won't see all the history of something in your JSS, stuff like that. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Charles.
Sure. I think that goes back to we'd like to see kind of greater integration with Jamf Pro there. So if they did something so that we would have that kind of granular insight into something like that. For us, it would be just looking in Jira to see exactly. We know if something was changed, it has to be in Jira. Someone put it in Jira, so we
Gotcha.
can go back through and kind of look that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. So if you have an idea for that, there's a hackathon going on this week. That would be a really great project. Just throwing that out there.
And you get a T-shirt if you win.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen the shirt?
Do you know who designed the shirt?
It was my idea. I didn't actually draw.
Okay. Well, it was his idea, so you should definitely work for it because it's pretty good.
It's a nice shirt.
Has anyone registered for the hackathon? Anyone playing?
Of course, Joel has. Joel
I see
has
some
it.
hands. I see some hands out there. That's pretty awesome. So we recently, in High Sierra, we started to see a process wherein Apple is moving toward more lockdown kernel environments. And so one of the features that started off as secure kernel extension loading, SKEL, and ended up as ukulele, I guess is the common term for it, which is user-accepted kernel extension loading. Do you guys have any thoughts on how that process evolved? Was that something that made it through your internal discussions as you were doing the High Sierra testing?
We had a lot of talks about this with a lot of people, yeah. So we, at Mac at IBM, we rely entirely on the native security posture of Mac OS. We use all the native tools. And so, anytime there's a change to security to make the platform more secure, that makes us happy, right? Because that's a better security story for us to tell. The main problem we had was kind of the timing, the way that it was done. And then also the experience of it. When they were going to launch, there wasn't going to be any MDM tie-in or something like that. And we, our users probably could click a button, but it wasn't certain that they would go click a button. And there were some really key applications that use a kernel extension. And so it was really going to be a pretty big issue for us. And so we're happy that they kind of paused for a second to let Jamf catch up with them. I think that's really it. We would just like to see better communication, better tie-in with the MDM before that, because that was a pretty major change in terms of the user experience.
Yeah, and as we saw in the community, there were a lot of people who had similar concerns. And large organizations that may begin with F and G certainly registered their own interpretations of the concerns surrounding that. And did you find, was that a two-way street for you? When you registered your concern concerning the timing and some things along those lines, did you feel like you had a good two-way street, a good partner?
So I will say in the beginning, I did not feel that way. I certainly, we knew that it was a big issue. Actually, Apple came to us to point it out. The Apple account team said, hey, are you aware of this? JD had already caught it, but it was good that they came to us with it. And then, we talked about it, and we didn't really feel like we were getting a lot back out of it. They said, well, this is kind of the way that it is, and users maybe will have to deal with it for a little bit. But in the end, I think they did obviously listen to us, because we feel very strongly they made this change because of us and the other companies reaching out.
Cool.
Now, first of all, I want to do a quick, since we have an audience, who here loves user-approved kernel extension loading?
I do see a hand out there. And
Yeah,
There's a
and a
couple
few
of
of
doors,
them,
you can use any one of
a few of
them.
the hands that went up are IBM employees. I just want to point that out.
Very good, very good.
And there was an Apple employee that raised their hand.
yeah.
Not that I'm going to out them.
Staying
This
on
isn't
brand.
spot
Watch out.
Apple.
Very good. Well,
There are no
that's
cameras
expected.
pointed directly at anybody except us
That's
here. So
expected.
you guys are safe. This is a safe space. We can have good discussions about it.
Now, can I do some prognosticating / future outlook? And you can totally
I'd
say,
really hope so.
I'm not going to comment on that. So I think we can all kind of see like where the wind is blowing. Like this is an early start of things to come, right? Like we're probably not going to have kernel extensions, which I think 80% good, because there are plenty of janky printer drivers that still insist on using a kernel extension for which can be done entirely outside of that space. Is this I guess a leading question? How do you feel about major changes being on the horizon as far as like what the user experience will be? I think we kind of can say like sort of a secure boot iOS type future is on the horizon. Does that make it sort of easier to for your future engineering plans? Does it make it harder? Like what sort of is the feeling about that?
You know, I think the key thing, again, is timing. So as long as we have enough time, our vendors that we work with have enough time to institute any changes, I don't think that we are opposed to any type of change. As long as it's, you know, improving the user experience, improving the security posture, all of these things, there's, you know, a meaningful reason to change it. Again, the key thing being that we're given time to actually change it. You know, we don't mind if it makes it harder for the engineering team as long as the user experience is still good. And again, there's actually benefit to the company.
Right, and I guess so basically we're saying a roadmap would be nice.
A roadmap would be very nice.
Okay, putting that out there.
And who thinks a roadmap will ever happen? No hands for
Yeah,
those
that's weird.
listening.
all
And
of those
anyone who
ghost-
does raise their hand is just kind of high right now. Which is, by the way, not legal here in Minnesota.
So at this point, I'd like to welcome someone else to the stage, another one of our fine sponsors, Alan Hancock from Watchman Monitoring. Alan, please come join us.
This is where we play some.
This is where we play some music.
We got it covered.
Very good. Glad to be here.
So Alan, tell us all about the community calendar.
Very good. So we have.
Mic up to your head. Yeah, there you go.
Very good.
Is that nice and big? Would that be better?
Very good. Well, it's the we have the shortened version of our sponsor read because it's always been too long. Mac Admin's community calendar is brought to you by Watch and Monitoring. Are you tired of users coming to you hair on fire because your computer isn't working? Wouldn't it be great to know before about a potential problem before it was too late? Would you like to solve your problems on your own schedule versus the problem's own schedule? Watch Monitoring is a lightweight, read-only, proactive support system that streamlines the support you provide by finding potential problems before they become serious issues. Integrated contact menu eases your support burden by putting convenient links to applications, tools, and resources at users' fingertips, and a custom branding option can help make it look like your own. Users are one click away from launching applications, accessing file shares, or sending you a support request. You visit watchmonitoring.com to start a risk-free trial and see how we can make your day-to-day run smoother. And we have a list of upcoming conferences for you. The 8th Annual MacTech Conference will be held at the Los Angeles Westin LAX this November 15th to 17th. Dates for their one-day pro events are forming for next year. And then AMSIS is hosting MacAd in Leicester Square, London, next February 20th and 21st of 2018. And for those of you looking to start planning a mid-year vacation, the Mac DevOps YVR will be held in Vancouver next June of 2018. It's on the 8th and 9th, which is a Friday and Saturday event. Matt is actively seeking a more diverse panel of speakers, and Watch and Monitoring continues to help provide sponsorship for that event. Next up, we have a list of community meetups. Mac DMV will meet this Saturday, October 28th, at 12 p.m. at Merriweather Post Pavilion. The Northeast Regional Mac Admins will meet on Tuesday, October 30th at 5:30 at the Wild Colonial Tavern in Providence, Rhode Island. Rewind Technology is hosting the Denver Mac Admins November 9th at 6:30 p.m. No, I'm sorry.
7 p.m.
We'll fix it in post.
Thanks.
Rewind Technology is hosting the Denver Mac Admins Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m. in their training center. The Dallas area Mac Admins will meet Thursday, November 9th at 6:30 p.m. at the Bottle Rocket Studios. The Jamf user group of New York City will meet Tuesday, November 14th at 4:30 p.m. And the Utah Mac Admins will meet Wednesday, November 15th at 11 a.m. at the Marriott Library at the University of Utah. Atlanta Apple Admins will hold their monthly meetup Thursday, November 16th at 6 p.m., hosted by SalesLoft. And MacBrain YVR will meet on November 22nd, and they have Hootsuite to thank for their venue this go round. Thank you all for being a part of the community. That is actually what makes this all go, and Watch and Monitoring wouldn't be anywhere without a community, and that's why we continue to sponsor events like the ones we've just read off, and keep up the great work.
Thanks very much, Alan. We appreciate Watchman's continued sponsorship of this lovely podcast. So, and you know, we've talked a little bit about some of the changes that have been coming. We've also got to look at kind of the future, and this is normally where John Kitzmiller would stand up and say, "Imaging is dead!"
But he's not here.
But he's not here.
No.
Sorry, Kitsy. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on imaging and device turnover. I mean, because we all have that, we all face that situation where we have a staffer depart and we have a hard drive machine to come back in, and then it's got to go back out in the field again to be a useful asset. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys handle some of that internally?
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind, again, the program's about 2 years old. So by the time we came around, imaging was not really a big thing anyways. We never, well, okay. It wasn't something that we heavily considered, partially because of the increased cost to IT. You know, shipping devices to a warehouse somewhere, someone has to physically touch all of them, ship them out to a user. Just a lot of complexity and cost that, you know, we didn't want to introduce. We rely on DP and internet recovery, so it's a very consumer-like experience for the most part. For turnover, if a computer does come back in, it does actually get shipped to a central place where someone does, again, leverage the consumer tools to actually re-image them. So again, internet recovery. And then that gets shipped back out. So it might go to another user. It might be used as a loaner device if you're getting your computer service, something like that.
Very cool. And so what's your timeline like for a machine coming back in? It obviously goes through a central warehousing period, gets unpacked, it gets examined, it gets imaged, it goes right back out into the field? Or does it enter like a stores pool, or?
That's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure, actually. Again, we're a new program, so we actually don't see a lot of that, right?
Sure.
A lot of times, if it's something, you know, a manager on a team has an employee leave, they might hold on to it and just re-image it themselves and hand it to the next employee so we never see it. Obviously, as you know, we reach end of life with a lot of these machines, it'll be kind of a bigger deal where we're kind of, you know, looking to do something. But right now, it's just not a big deal, a big issue for us.
Yeah, and do you guys have a mental model for what the lifespan of a machine should be? Is this a 3-year lifespan? Is it a 4-year lifespan? What did you guys kind of plan for?
IBM standard is 4 years. Yeah.
Very cool. I have a couple of clients who will be happy to hear that, you know, that they align with the IBM model. So,
Fantastic.
You mean the owners or the users?
some of both. I'm not sure, but you know, I will mention one of our clients is a small barbecue company here in the DC area. Not here in the DC area, but there in the DC area. And they recently hosted an event for IBM. And they were of course nervous. They're a mostly PC shop becoming a Mac shop. And so they took a minute. The owner took a minute and was like, how's that going? What do you guys think about all of that? And they got a very glowing report back from their you know, IBM staffers out in the field. Oh yeah, it's been great. We love this. This is wonderful. And it's kind of eased their internal feelings towards that migration process. So I have to say, on behalf of my users, thank you for making this a decision that we can point to and say, well, if IBM's doing it, shouldn't you be too? So thank you.
We're happy to help.
I was going to bring up, Tom, and this is sort of like, I'll sneak in a little bit of news because it just happened to come across the wire. Apple put up a new knowledge-based article describing some extra steps you need to take when you repurpose one of these ones to actually wipe the SEP on it, the biometric storage. It seems to be an important thing to wipe the fingerprint data that when you give it to a user and they register fingerprints, it actually stays on there. So you can do an OS wipe, but that data stays on there. So I think they're now recommending that you run a utility to basically erase all that data. So
excellent.
Those are probably things that you constantly have to stay on top of too, like your process as much as you use user-facing tools.
Sure.
Those are the kind of the things you have to stay up with as well.
So you're saying you don't want his fingerprint on like Ginny's MacBook?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to have that KBase link in the show notes for everybody to view. And if you're listening at home later, those are all, of course, available at podcast.macadmins.org.
Good job, Tom.
Thank you. I'm on brand today.
Yes.
So we talked about we talked about imaging and we talked about UAT. How do you beta test new operating systems?
So JD starts as soon as...
JD can stand, by the way, when we're referencing him.
JD, ready?
As soon as the first beta comes out, JD starts. Before you even ask him to, he's already downloaded it, he's already testing. Very eager to see what he can break. The first step of it's just kind of functional testing, so going through all of our workflows, all of the things that a standard user would do, And then he goes to the edge cases, so all the things that the crazy users do, or things that we've heard about. Again, we start with beta 1, we file bugs right away, even though we know some of those things are not operating as intended, that they will be changed. We make sure to file bugs just to make sure they're aware that they
By
impact
the way,
us.
when you give your impact statement of 120,000, does that help or?
I'm not sure. They don't seem to act any differently than any.
I'm so shocked. I'm so shocked. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I think this all the time. They ask for that impact statement, and you send it over, and you expect some like, wow, okay.
Or someone's
No.
like, he's trolling. That's not for
No,
real.
no. It doesn't seem to make a difference at all. We could say 5, and I think they would react the exact same way. The other thing that we do is, and it's probably one of the most important things that we do, and that's an email and a communication campaign to all of our application owners. So we maintain a database and contacts for all the various applications that we host in our store. Or the critical IBM applications, and we immediately reach out to them and say, hey, there's a new operating system coming. IBM supports new operating systems on day 1. Is your application ready? And we ask that they vet that and get back to us and say, yes, we've confirmed support for 10.13, or we're going to have support on this day, whatever it might be. But IBM supports new operating system day 1, and we expect our application owners to be ready with that.
Now, given that, I think this is what I got as an outsider. I've seen the keynote sort of like describing that there's less of an emphasis or a reliance on getting a whole lot of like applications installed sort of like off the bat. There's more, just web apps that get most users on their way. Does that whole process make it easier or harder when you have both in-house applications that are just web apps that probably hopefully will work without too much issue, internal apps versus having to test against a whole huge catalog of third-party apps that you need to file bugs with the vendor maybe too about? Like, does that make it easier, harder, or is it sort of like the same thing but different?
Yeah, so a lot of our applications are internal applications, and so obviously that's a lot easier because we don't have to go to a vendor, and vendors typically move a little bit slower, or you have no insight into their process. So a lot of the applications we deploy are internal IBM applications, so we have a lot of weight, because also we have 120,000 users, so even as a commercial product, that's a lot of users there. So I think that makes it a little easier. So initially, we did start with saying we weren't going to hold up the deployment for the sake of making sure every application worked on the Mac. But over the years, we've made sure actually all these applications are working. So now we have a fairly considerable application portfolio that we do have to kind of keep track of.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So you said that before you're utilizing auto package to generate some apps. Are you also using VPP, and how do you handle that in multiple geolocations?
So we do not leverage VPP at all. IBM operates in 170 countries around the world, and so that introduces a lot of complexities, especially with VPP. And we're trying to maintain a uniform experience. We don't care where you are. If you're an IBMer, you should have the exact same experience around the world. And so because of that, we do not leverage VPP.
So, yeah, I was going to say, you're probably going to say DEP, right?
Yes, you read my mind. How do you handle that in geos that don't have DEP?
Yeah, so obviously if DEP is not available, DEP is not available. So those users do go to a URL. We made it as simple as possible. It's the exact same experience once you run the quick add. But we do have users in DEP-enabled countries that maybe also go through that workflow for various reasons as well. So it is slightly different, unfortunately, but there's nothing we can do there.
At some point, you just kind of got to roll with what you got and, adapt, overcome these wonderful survivor words.
And speaking of overcoming, you mentioned you didn't want to hold up the deployment for apps, just looking for, you didn't want to hold anything up based on whether or not there was a Mac version of a given app. What was that process like? Did you end up having to virtualize things? Did you end up having to write your own custom apps?
Sure. So IBM has an internal application portfolio of about 3,000 applications, and obviously that was a little scary to us initially when we deployed Macs, because we essentially said we're going to deploy Macs. We had a list, is the Mac right for me? These are applications we know that work. These are applications we know there's a Mac alternative to, and then we just went with it. And out of the 3,000 apps, I believe about 78 ended up being an issue. So only 78 out of those 3,000 did we hear from users, hey, I need this to do my job. And then we slowly went through and modernized that app to be either web-based or updated it to work on the Mac. In very, very limited scenarios, there is virtualization, but very, very limited.
I hear those were all Java apps. Is that correct?
It is IBM.
guess I'm jumping in.
Go for it.
It's all right, I can fix that in post.
It won't be the first time. So you have hired some of the best and brightest out there in the industry, and even stealing from Charles and the rest of Jamp and JD and the rest of the folks from Apple and some of the other folks there. But what do you just think about when you describe the state of the recruiting industry for Apple admins everywhere? And just trying to think of the best way to phrase that question. It's always a challenge when we're live, right? I can usually rely on James to fix me in post, but how would you describe that process? You're out there looking for something that maybe IBM has never seen. I mean, it maybe is the same, maybe it's not.
Yeah, so I was an external hire. Everyone on the team was an external hire. I think actually recruiting for a Mac engineer is relatively easy, and the reason for that is, one, we have a huge community, so you have a lot of really talented people out there. We did some recruiting at JNUC, and the other thing is, the good thing about Mac engineers is they're typically really passionate about what they do, and I think that's one of the most important factors with success. So really, every time that we've gone through kind of a hiring round, it's been very, very difficult to choose a candidate because you get a lot of very, very highly qualified candidates that are very passionate about the project, they're very passionate about the job. They were excited to interview for Mac at IBM because of the scale, and so maybe we're a little bit spoiled, but I found recruiting to be incredibly easy because there are so many talented engineers out there.
And I mean, all you have to do is say, "Hey Watson, find me."
You just set off someone's Watson somewhere.
Somewhere there's
But
a
really,
super.
I saw a session on Watson earlier. So do you guys just ask Watson to answer all the Mac questions? Like, for example, JD's like, "Hey Watson, what bugs do I have?"
The secret to our success, actually, we just sit around and talk to Watson all day. Spits out answers.
That sounds really fun.
He's kind of boring, but he gets the job done.
I ask Alexa, and she just starts playing weird music.
So
That's probably you, Charles.
do y'all ask Watson like what Mac news and developments you should know about? Like, how do you keep a tab on there's so many streams of information now? Like, how do y'all churn the information?
Sure, I think that goes back to the hiring question. Again, I think Mac engineers tend to be really passionate about what they do. It's not something that I have to actively do with the team, say like, "Hey, are you keeping up to date with stuff?" They are keeping up to date. As soon as anything comes out, someone has already posted in Slack, someone is, coming to us, scheduling meeting, whatever. The team is always really on top of stuff. I mean, it's just not something that we really kind of think about, I think, because they're so passionate in their personal lives. They're already doing it. They're already, when they get home at night, they're kind of reading through all the news of the day, stuff like that.
Have you noticed any big trends or things that are popping up besides Skell or whatever we want to call it now that are kind of on the mind in the community that y'all are thinking about at IBM?
I can't really speak to the community, things that, I think are kind of emerging issues. But for IBM, the big focus for us right now, and always has been, is the user experience. And so we very frequently make our lives very hard for the sake of the user. And I think that's something that we continue to think about, ways that we can improve the user experience even at the cost of IT. And we're really working very hard to kind of get through and kind of smooth down some of the rough edges of the program. Because again, we're only 2 years old, so a lot of these programs that you guys have out there are a lot more mature than ours. It's just the scale is a little different.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's from the flip coin, the other side of the coin, as far as recruiting goes, it is good to be in an organization where you are trusted to be that sort of that early warning system of knowing, your boss knowing that you will keep an eye on what's going on, kind of bring the important bits, sort of filter out the unimportant bits, because you can be, there's always sort of just do the job and just get the thing done, and it seems like when you are on the front end, you are going to run into specific things that, may be something you want to address, but, so I like that response of having the people that do the work actually bring the sort of the longer view back to the organization and having that mixed back in. So
Sure.
I like that.
So you've got people all over the world. I imagine that could be challenging. Got any tips on that?
So I think our team, for the most part, we are all over the place. We do have a few folks that are co-located, but there are so many good communication tools out there. We really don't have any issues. We had an outage not so long ago, and we were on, WebEx for, 18 hours, something like that. And, I don't think it was any different than if we were in the room together. Of course, we're in Slack all day. We're on the phone. I mean, there are just so many ways to communicate. I think we're very highly effective. We really never once have I thought, if we were in an office together, would this work more smoothly? I think we're very effective working remotely.
Chat ops come work, but you have to manage it properly.
So, of course, we've got to, talk it out in terms of, tool sets and things along those lines. Do we want to just, roll through a couple of lightning round questions? Tabs versus spaces, Bash versus Python, ZSH versus
Please
something
don't do
else?
that to me.
You can't give away what the questions are before we ask them.
I mean, that's true. That kind of defeats the purpose of a lightning. Yeah. Let's go. So here we go. So Bash or Python?
Python.
Every day, twice on Sunday?
I'm sorry?
Every day of the week and twice on Sunday?
Sure. That's what my team would tell me to say.
So tabs versus spaces, do you come down on one line or the other?
I have no opinion on that. Apparently here I'm supposed to have an opinion on that. From,
I've heard that too.
Silicon
I really
Valley.
don't have one.
Wait, this is going to be really fun. Raise your hand. Tabs.
Okay.
Spaces.
That's pretty evenly split.
So apparently I was supposed to say spaces. My team overwhelmingly voted spaces there.
So we'll have a rumble in the lobby later.
Yeah.
Later.
Tabs versus
Sharks versus Jets.
Sure. There was whistling for those of you who didn't hear that at home. So what do you end up building a lot of your middleware tools in?
Yeah, so we have the kind of fortunate and unfortunate experience of integrating with a lot of legacy IBM environments, and some of these are really, really old environments, very, very, very old. They invented technology before there was some type of standard way of doing things. And so for the most part, we just put everything into a middleware database. It's just a MySQL database. They can come to us and get the information they need, pick it up, or sometimes we drop information off, if they need it that way. But it's pretty simple, but it works.
And what tools might you have actually integrated with?
So for example, VPN, the way that we do VPN is very, very complicated, and we have to do a lot of back and forth with kind of the VPN servers to say, yes, we know this device, yes, we trust it, this is the identifier, come back to us and say, this is our identifier, tie these together. It's extremely complicated, and there are much better, kind of more modern ways of doing it, but we do it this way.
I like how animated you are about this VPN situation.
If you look at my team, they're all laughing hysterically because we spend a very long time kind of working on that. But that's a good example. It was easier for us to kind of work in a complicated way to get the user experience we wanted versus putting some bad user experience out there and not integrating with it.
So you mentioned that, that you host your environment in the IBM cloud. Any tips on scaling out to handle about 120,000 devices?
So again, the biggest thing for us
Other
is
than hard,
the biggest thing is monitoring. So again, we monitor, I think it's 300 or something metrics, and we constantly take a look at those, and we're kind of looking at trends over time. We look at trends, different times of the week, when we know that there's a heavy day of check-ins or we're pushing something out to see how the infrastructure is responding. And so we know exactly when we should add another server. We know exactly when there's something that needs to be modified or optimized. Again, that's been really kind of critical to the scaling piece.
Do you think that ultimately this might be something that is sort of contributable back to the community as far as like how to run your infrastructure in, because I know you guys have some really exciting products like Bluemix and all that. There's a real focus on like doing more with the cloud and having standard tools out there. So is that something that we might see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with the IBM teams internally to kind of give them some best practices in terms of integrating. And then this is one of the parts that we have shared with the community at JNUC last year or the year before. We shared some of the stuff that we kind of track and monitor, how we do that. So definitely, I think it's something the community will hopefully get some benefit from.
Awesome.
So you mentioned monitoring. Do you monitor at the JMX level on the JSS or Jamf Pro server? I see your team shaking their hands.
Yeah, fortunately, my team's
So-
back there giving me the answers. I am told that the answer to that is yes.
And I guess, how did you reverse engineer how to do the JMXs? Did you just figure that out on your own, or did you hire someone from Jamf who had done it for you?
No, Pat was, here, I'll look for the answer. I know the guy to look to. No, Pat, I think for the most part, kind of figured out this stuff on his own, and we've figured it out with time as well. So as we've had an outage, as we've had something kind of go wrong, we've said, hey, what could we have been watching to prevent this? And we go back and add that. In the beginning, we were just kind of tracking the normal things that you would track, CPU, disk, space, stuff like that. And now that's really grown it with time. And again, every time we have some type of either outage or slowdown, something like that, we go back, we take a look at what happened, and we try our best to add things to prevent it from happening again.
Let me ask you one more question before we go to our exciting bonus round. Because I try to bring up security topics from now and then. So we've gotten sort of the, what you're looking at for where the macOS is going in general, security-wise. What are the things you're, I guess, most afraid of? Like, what has the biggest impact on such a huge user base, which is, unparalleled as far as like Mac users goes? I ask that because there's, we see more and more things like, supply line attacks. Someone sneaks in some malware into an often used, a popular tool, and before you know it, you poison the well. Like, kind of like big picture, like what
Sure.
concerns you? What keeps you up at night?
Something that we're kind of struggling with, I really struggle with, is the balance between, making the life of the user easy and also kind of where we overstep the bounds of what IT should do. So for example, we had an application that was a legitimate application. It was a good application. There was a valid business case for having it on your computer, but there was a slight risk that maybe it had been compromised. And so we're in long talks with security. They want us to remove it from all devices. I feel like that's very heavy hand. We at IBM, we really try to do as little as possible in terms of intruding into the user's life. And so kind of balancing that with security and continuing to hopefully make a good case for relying on kind of the tools that we do and the experience that we do. A big thing that we do at IBM is, one, we try not to worry about the endpoint too much. We have a lot of security analytics out there in other places, protect the application, stuff like that. And I think that certainly makes our life a lot easier because we don't really have to worry about the endpoint so much.
Nice. Very cool. So Tom, you want to take us through the bonus round?
I will take us to the bonus question, but first I'm going to thank our sponsors for joining us today. Joel and the nice folks at Nomad, thank you so much for sponsoring this awesome podcast. And of course, our friends at Watchman Monitoring who are here. JD, Alan, thank you very much. And our after party today is sponsored also by Duo Security and by Technolutionary. Technolutionary is going to forego an ad read. I don't know. I can put you on the spot if you wanted to read something.
I don't know. Use our stuff. It's awesome. There you go.
That works.
I've got a byline for you. Duo, the most loved company in security.
That's what it is. Yeah, sorry. I'm really terrible at this. Like, if you ask me to do it, I'm like, yeah, that. So do that. That's good.
So the title security researcher doesn't come with...
With heavy media training, no, it does not.
But you have been in the media a lot recently, so
Yeah.
high fives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been pretty great. So, of course,
exciting
and that now takes us to our wonderful bonus question, and we're right on the time limits here, so do quickly answer this one. But what's the best part about being at JNUC? And I'll let you go first, Eric.
Sure, I think it's just meeting everyone here and hearing everyone's stories. I think our story is very interesting, but it is not like anything else that anyone is doing. So I always find it really interesting to hear about these other deployments. We learn a lot about them, or a lot that we could do maybe differently.
Very cool. Charles?
I'll be Jampy and say that, that it's seeing our customers help each other more than anything.
Love that.
You got that training, clearly.
Papine, how about you?
I have two. First of all, I just flew in from Michigan, and I like that you guys have the weather that we should have had for the past couple of weeks, so that's good. I enjoy being like in what
You're
should
welcome.
Be, yeah, I think it moves that way, right? I just like meeting a lot of new faces, because I don't really, this is my first time at JNUC. I don't really tend to hang with the crowd that comes here, because I'm not a Jamf admin. But it's awesome to talk to just a whole new crowd of even more Mac admins,
Yes.
Apple admins. There's so many of them.
Yes.
Over 13,000, I hear.
Yeah. James, how about you?
I got to say, the photo competition in the JNUC app, that's been really fun.
So everybody pick up your phone and take a picture this way, and we'll get your points.
It is actually one of the criteria is take a photo here at the recording to do that. But in all seriousness, just meeting everyone. Obviously, Aussie accent. I flew over 20 hours to get here, so it's great to meet everyone in the community. Yeah.
Emily?
I have two, and I'll keep it short. The first one is this is the first time I've had the opportunity to sit with all of these gentlemen in a room and do a podcast recording, so that's very exciting for me. It's kind of cool for us to all be together finally in one place. The second is, so I'm in the CCE, so I'm missing some of the sessions during the day, but I waterworks during the Haiti video during the keynote today. Man, Jamf does some really good stuff out in the community and in the world, so that's really cool to see.
Yeah, and as someone who, this is also my first JNUC, and this was, if anything, the best possible introduction that I could have ever had to the organization as a whole, to understand not just what they're implementing technically, but who's doing the implementation. And the speakers that have been out there today have been absolutely phenomenal. And I just want to give a shout out to Diana from Shopify, who just gave an awesome presentation in the security workshop, talking a little bit how they're utilizing security as a philosophy, not just as a technical competency. And that was a real eye-opener for me. So I had an awesome time today. I'm sadly only here tomorrow. I've got to get back to work in DC. But this has really changed the way that I will look at Jamf, generally speaking, and toward the positive. So this has been an awesome experience. Eric, thank you so much for spending this time with us to talk with us about how IBM is working with the Mac generally.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a real pleasure. We'd love to have you back sometime, maybe next year.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
Let's hear it for Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So this is where I get to do my quick after show moment where I can say, please, if you like this podcast, please review us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Star this in your Overcast application so that we can help penetrate the market a little bit further and more Apple admins out there in the world can see and hear this podcast other places. And of course, leave us a review. You can tell us whatever you like. You can say that, that Tom guy, he's a real bumbler on the words. And as long as you leave us 5 stars, I'll just be like, yes, I did bumble those words. They were terrible in places. But that helps other people find this podcast, generally speaking, and that's super helpful. And thanks very much to all of us who sponsor this podcast, Watchman, Nomad, Duo, Technolutionary. And we will see you all at Brits Pub at 7 o'clock tonight. And there is an open bar tab, and there will be some snacks. So come hungry, come thirsty, and we'll see you there. So other than that, we will see you next time.
Thanks for coming, y'all.
Thank you.